from 35 to 70 billions in terms of food import. So the agreement, I think we all agree that the CFTA, the AFCFTA, will create opportunities to increase intra-African trade, and then to also, through integrated markets, we'll be able to support development of agro-processing. Now, how do we seize these opportunities? I think these are very critical issues. How do we address effectively tariff and non-tariff barriers? So some ideas that came from the floor, from the discussion and the panelists are, we need to make sure that inclusivity is taken on board, which means we consider interests of women and youth, small and medium enterprises, as well as smallholders. We also need to prioritize competitive value chains development because most of the time I think we have the same structure in terms of production pattern in African country. So we need to prioritize. One key discussion, and maybe that could be also taken by the ministers, do we prioritize made in Africa, or do we look rather to prioritize made in each country? So branding issue is key. How do we also increase productivity? How do we support farmers through efficient extension services? We also need to look at how do we create group of small farmers to address issues around the way they are scattered today so that they can also maximize the benefit and reduce costs when they come as a group to make business. Other issues to consider is we also need to address security issues in Africa and move easily product from one area to another, while we make sure that we reinforce mutual trust among our countries. We also need to facilitate access to land, which is very critical for farmers, and then we incorporate or integrate social dimension and human rights as we want to move from AFCFTA from decisions to action. So these are some of the key points I think we took from that session that could lead the discussion over the next plenary. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. It's very insightful. Next up, I'd like to get an idea about the key takeaways from the increasing power supply through cross-border networks. This was moderated by Mamadou Bitaye, Managing Director for Africa at the Rockefeller Foundation, who's seated at the front. If you'd like to hand him the microphone and we can find out what the discussions were in that room.
Okay, thank you very much. I will try to remember, but a few things that the discussion turned around was that actually power trading was not really new. It's been really ongoing for a long time on the continent. But yet, if you look at power trading today, only 20% of traded power is done on spot markets. But 80% really goes through bilaterals. And the reason for that is, and what can really drive costs down and bring competitivity is really when you go on the spot market. But the reason why most of it is on the bilateral is because of different standards and different policies. For instance, when you take contracts, actually they are not standardized. They are very different and make them totally, for instance, unimplementable. So there is work to be done at that level. Sometimes also policies, pricing, and all of those issues, and where the origin of the type of generation and all of that, actually we don't have an harmonized approach that would facilitate that trading. The other thing also that was talked about was the existence of the power pools in most of the regions, the WAP, the East African power pool, Southern African power pool, but all of them have varying degrees or levels of development and functionality. So what is needed actually to bring them all, to level them up so that they can really work. So the other thing that was discussed was not necessarily just what the AFCT can do in the power market, but looking at the nexus between power and all the other sectors. For instance, the need of bringing new business models was emphasized. But many of these business models are not yet economically viable because of the issues of consumption. But consumption is also plagued by, for instance, in agriculture, lack of access to markets. So if you had better access to market, then there will be more revenue and income, then increased capacity to invest into technologies, appliances, productive assets, etc., that can contribute to making these new models more economically viable. So there was a vast array of very interesting subjects around that were discussed. But for me, those are some of the highlights that I've taken away.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And it's interesting that you talk about Nexus, because really power is the basis for the other two sessions, agriculture, but also data for development. So we're going to hear now from Ibrahima Diani, who's a managing director at Giand 2000. I'm sorry if I've slightly butchered your name. No, okay, we're safe.
The name of Giand has been never pronounced with a so lovely accent. So we discuss about data. We recognize the importance of data and the criticity of data for policymakers, for decision. We also recognize the importance of data for businesses and data for people' normal lives. And we realize that there is a lot of difficulty to collect accurate data. And we also have the difficulty to capture the real size of the informal trade by statistics. We've got a very interesting demonstration that the size of informal trade can be sometimes 5 times what the official statistics shows. And we also realize that there is a lot of value on data in the transaction in the digital era. And we just recommend that we need to reinforce skills of Africans to manage the data. You know, this time in university, the new skills to be developed is sometimes called data sciences. We don't have it because we're still on the normal and traditional way of university, the way we are training our people. So we need definitively to change it. And we also need infrastructure to collect data because we are in the era of artificial intelligence and big data, so we need those capacity. And we finally need to regulate our economies and also to protect our population with the data issue. These are the few elements that were discussed in our session. It was not easy because data is very large and we have many different perspectives, but it was a very interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you for the updates from the session moderators. With those sectoral conversations in mind, power, agriculture and data, let's now turn to the Ministers' Roundtable. National governments have no small feat ahead of them when it comes to ratification and implementation of the AFCFTA. Essentially, they are going to be the interlocutors between the continental, regional and national level. Furthermore, they have a task to balance regional integration with national policies and priorities. So the question is, what's the best way to do this? So there's no better way than actually asking the national government officials directly, and that's what we're going to be doing this afternoon. I'd like to introduce and welcome each one of our speakers to the stage. We have Ambassador Chedu Osakwe, who's the Chief Trade Negotiator for the Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And just as a side note, he is replacing His Excellency, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. And next, I'd like to welcome to the stage His Excellency Mohammed Abdullah, the Minister and Head of the Commercial Office of the Egyptian Embassy in Lagos. And next we have His Excellency Al-Hassan Ag Moussa, Minister of Trade of Mali. Welcome. And then we have Chakiri Tijani, who's the Technical Advisor on Trade from Benin. Thank you. Now, this is a truly Pan-African panel because we have Francophone and Anglophone speakers. My French is okay, but not great, so I'm going to use my headset. So if anybody needs translation from English to French, I encourage you to use your headsets now or take them from outside of the room if you don't already have them. So we're going to start the discussion. I'm going to pose a few questions to the panel, and then we're going to head over to the audience for a question and answer session. I'd like to start by asking Al-Hassan Ag Moussa, Minister of Trade. I'll allow you to get your earphones on first. Would you like your headset? It's fine? Okay. I'd like to ask you, Mali is a landlocked country, meaning, you know, paying a higher price for not having seaports of your own and depending on ports of other countries, increasing the cost of trade compared to people that are not landlocked or countries that are not. So what does Mali expect to benefit from the AFCFTA in particular?
Merci. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers of this conference to give us the opportunity to speak on the creation of the free trade, the African free trade. La Deuxième République les problèmes de l'unité africaine après le Nigeria. Le Nigeria au niveau de la CEDEAO et en termes de potentialité au niveau de l'Union de l'Afrique, il est le troisième producteur de l'or après l'Afrique du Sud et le Ghana. Or, pour réaliser les investissements qu'il faut et soutenir un développement durable au Mali, il faut un marché extrêmement important. Et ce marché ne peut être réalisé qu'à travers l'unité africaine, qu'à travers la création d'un marché du libre échange dans l'espace à l'échelle Union africaine. C'est pour cela que nous considérons que la création de la zone de libre-échange est plutôt une opportunité. Il peut y avoir des contraintes, il peut y avoir des disparités en raison de l'existence des organisations sous-régionales, mais l'existence de ces organisations sous-régionales, à notre avis, doit être exploitée comme un atout. Parce que là, vous avez des sous-ensembles homogènes dans un grand ensemble. L'existence de ces sous-ensembles peut faciliter en réalité la création de l'ensemble homogène. C'est pour cela, contrairement à certains, nous ne croyons pas que le fait d'avoir plusieurs organisations régionales au niveau du continent africain soit un frein à la démarche. C'est plutôt, elle doit nous permettre d'aller de l'avant. Maintenant, il s'agit de faire l'évaluation de chaque organisation sous-régionale dans quel domaine elle est avancée et essayer de faire bénéficier cette expérience de cette organisation domaine d'harmonisation des politiques, dans les domaines de l'harmonisation de la réglementation. D'aucuns disent au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Est, l'organisation au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Est est assez avancée en termes d'intégration des marchés. Donc chacune de ces organisations a développé une certaine expérience qui peut faire tache d'huile à l'échelle africaine. Donc c'est pour cela que nous pensons que l'accord de libre-échange, nous l'avons ratifié depuis mars, et nous l'avons signé depuis mars, et nous nous préparons à les ratifier au niveau de l'Assemblée nationale. En tout cas, ça va être ratifié dans les semaines à venir. Maintenant, nous pensons qu'il y a une démarche au niveau des États. D'abord, au niveau de chaque organisation sous-régionale, il y a un travail d'analyse, d'évaluation de ce qui a été fait, de ce qui n'a pas marché, et faire une planification au niveau de chaque organisation sous-régionale. Ces planifications au niveau des organisations sous-régionales doivent aider à avoir une planification des actions à mettre en place pour la mise en œuvre de la zone de libre-échange au niveau continental. Donc voilà à peu près, Madame, les quelques éléments que je voudrais donner à ce stade de nos échanges. Merci.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And then still keeping within ECOWAS, although we're talking about Pan-Africanism and not about regional blocs, I'd like to now turn to Ambassador Asokwe. First of all, I'm going to ask you, when is Nigeria going to sign? Tomorrow. There we have it. We have an exclusive tomorrow. No, but on a serious note, we've heard about the reservations of Nigeria, but being the chief negotiator, I wondered if you could just give us a bit more detail and context around the reservations of the country, or the kind of the process for adopting and signing the AFCFTA.
We don't have reservations on the AFCFTA. Now, believe it or not, I think we better dispel that myth. There aren't reservations. What you had the Vice President say this morning, to whom I report, and is the chairman of the Economic Management Team, is that the government initiated a process for ownership building, consensus building, engagement with the stakeholders to line up our ducks, to do our homework, and also it's basically done. Over the past 8 months, from the month of March till about a couple of days ago, and the last 2 days of October, I know that we are ahead of every signatory country to the AFCFTA. It's a statement of fact. At every single level, we've done what we need to do. We've done our work on goods, we've done our work on services, we've done our work with regard to a rules-based trade remedy mechanism. We have done east to west, north to south, political and economic consultations in the country. We have rejigged our trade policy, and now there is a final process of putting it in a package that goes up to the president. But there's never been a reservation, and I'm on record, there's never been a reservation by Nigeria on the AFCFTA. Look at the speech by Nigeria's first foreign minister and our first prime minister, 24th of May, 1963, the very first meeting of the Organization of African Unity. Nigeria made the case for the African Common Market. It had to take the OAU and the AU to 2012, to the 18th Ordinary Assembly, to have a decision to move ahead with the AFCFTA. And only until Johannesburg, in 2015 to actually launch the negotiations. And you had the minister, my minister this morning, we put out our bragging rights. He chaired the final meeting. And with my colleagues here, including Tijani Ki Ela ici, c'est nous qui avons fait toutes les négociations pour conclure le SLECA. On a bien, franchement, on est tout à fait solide et stable et confiant sur notre position à propos de SLECA. On est prêt. Mais comme M. le vice-président a dit ce matin, c'est une grande démocratie, il y a des pluralités et il faut mettre tout en ordre avant de pouvoir prendre la décision. Et c'est M. le président qui va prendre cette décision. Et on le fera.
Thank you. Strong statement. Then on that point, I just wanted to follow up because the AFCFTA Readiness Committee is now in process. And I wanted to understand a bit more, or actually for the purposes of the audience, how does the work of this committee build on the previous consultations? And I very much appreciate your point about public consultations. I work in Brussels and public consultations is what they do best. So yeah, it is a very important part of the democratic process. But if you could shine a light on the Readiness Committee.
What the president did on the 22nd of October, he set up a formal committee. Because the problem that we've had, this is a bit of a Catholic confession, but we can say it openly. We have had, like in most governments, a left-hand, right-hand problem. One not knowing what the other is doing. So the president set up a committee. There's a steering group with all the big ministers in government, the foreign affairs minister, Minister of Budget and National Planning, the finance ministers, interior affairs and defense. And then there is a steering group, and there's a technical working group to which I belong. So your question is, how does this committee, how does it build on what we have done at my technical level in the past 8 months, March to October? Now, what you have in the technical working group is that you have the division, you have the technical working group divided into 4 major groupings. You have trade enforcement, which we have never had before in Nigeria. We have a trade enforcement working subcommittee. You have an ECOWAS subcommittee. You have a subcommittee dealing with standards. And there's another subcommittee. And so basically what we're doing now is feeding in to an MDA private sector process the results and the feedback from a very diligent nationwide process. And in other words, let's use a jargon from the PRSP days of the IMF. Mainstreaming what we have done. That's the vocabulary. Mainstreaming what we have done into national policy. That's exactly what we're doing. And then it comes and everyone owes it. And so, as the vice president said in the morning, 10 years down the line, you don't have someone say, a group in society saying, on n'était pas consulté. That now has been taken completely off the table. It's slow, it's tedious. I have pulled my hair in frustration as well because I'm a negotiator, and together with David, Luke, and lots of people here, I wanted it signed. But they said to me, listen, you've done your work as a negotiator, good job. But that's not all of Nigeria. There is a whole population out there of stakeholders, and I realized that the laugh was on me. I was wrong, and that negotiators have to wait for stakeholders to be engaged and to get their own thinking before you wrap this up. Otherwise, you're really asking for trouble. Yeah. And look around the world, beyond Africa, that's exactly what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. It's very, very helpful. So now I want to Now I want to deviate to Chakiro Tijani, the technical advisor on trade for Benin. I'd like to understand how Benin intends to maximize the opportunities in the AFCFTA, but really in the context of its role in West Africa and transit trade as well.
Merci, Madame. Je voudrais remercier la Fondation Rockefeller, la CEA, l'Union africaine, le Nigeria d'avoir permis cette rencontre. Et ce que je vais déclarer va peut-être surprendre certains, c'est que le Bénin n'a pas signé encore. Et pour le négociateur en chef que j'étais, ça a été une surprise. Mais une surprise bien comprise parce que nous avons aujourd'hui à la tête du Bénin une direction qui veut la rupture, ne veut pas qu'on aille négocier des accords et qu'on vienne qu'ils signent. Le chef de l'État a demandé, comme ça a été fait au Nigeria, c'est comme s'il y avait une concertation. Aller consulter, aller parler avec toutes les parties prenantes, les journalistes, la société civile, les consommateurs, les députés, tout le monde doit être informé de l'enjeu avant qu'ils ne signent. Ils ne veulent pas signer et revenir pour dire voilà comment ça se passe. Quand on connaît la position du Bénin, la position géographique du Bénin, l'économie du Bénin, comment ça évolue depuis des années, nous sommes dans l'intégration régionale. Nous sommes une porte d'entrée pour les pays dans la CEDEAO, entre l'Afrique francophone et l'Afrique et le reste des autres pays de la CEDEAO. Donc, il était inimaginable qu'un pays comme le Bénin, qui est membre de l'UEMOA, où tous les autres pays ont signé, ne signe pas. Non, le Bénin n'a pas signé. Et je voudrais également déjà porter à votre connaissance que nous avons entrepris je dirais pas cette popularisation, ces contacts avec les différentes parties. Le bilan est fait, est en train d'être acheminé vers les autorités. Mais je puis déjà vous dire, au regard de la politique qui est menée, comme l'a dit le ministre malien, le Bénin est pour l'intégration. Le Bénin, c'est le pays africain où tous les Africains peuvent rentrer sans visa aujourd'hui. Le Bénin a compris que pour faire l'intégration régionale, il faut la sécurité. Le Bénin a compris, pour qu'il y ait l'intégration régionale, il faut que tous les membres, tous les investisseurs soient traités sur le même palier. On a pris les tests. Et le tribunal de commerce existe désormais. Au niveau des nouvelles technologies, tout ce qui doit être fait pour que l'intégration régionale devienne une réalité, pour que l'investisseur africain qui veut venir au Bénin soit dans les mêmes conditions. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Vous voyez, le Bénin, c'est comme s'il y a eu une désindustrialisation du Bénin pendant le temps. Pendant 20 ans, la plupart de nos industries ont disparu, les industries agroalimentaires. Aujourd'hui, pour aller vers un développement de ce secteur, on a besoin de changer de paradigme, d'aller vers autre chose. Aujourd'hui, le Bénin produit le coton, exporte son coton à 100%. Par contre, ce coton est cultivé dans des zones qui sont situées entre le Bénin et le Nigeria. Pourquoi ne pas renforcer la production du coton dans toute cette région et se dire, écoutez, tout ce qui est coton hydrophile, tout ce qui est les cotons de pansement, les draps de lit pour les hôpitaux, tout ça, on se spécialise et tous les pays africains vont venir acheter là. Et un interlocuteur ce matin a parlé des noix de cajou, de la position du Nigeria, de la Côte d'Ivoire par rapport à ça, à l'horizon 2020. Nous ne pouvons plus penser pays si nous voulons aller à l'intégration. C'est la position du Bénin aujourd'hui. Le Bénin ne pense plus pays, le Bénin pense région, le Bénin pense Afrique. Et tous les investisseurs qui veulent venir et tous les partenaires qui peuvent accompagner ce processus de mise en œuvre
there's an implementation of this African Free Trade Zone that can actually create enough impact and improve the production capacity of Africa, the quality and respect for standards. Women, microfinance, we are therefore, we are looking at
les hommes du secteur privé. Qu'est-ce qu'il faudrait? Le commerce des services. C'est un gros marché. Il faut qu'on s'organise. Il faut qu'on libère, qu'on lève les barrières non tarifaires entre nous. Le commerce des produits agro-industriels, toutes sortes de... Même l'enseignement. Moi, je parle en français, là, et bon, c'est pas normal, alors que je suis Yoruba, de part et d'autre, il y a des Yorubas. Vous voyez, pourquoi ne pas bâtir notre intégration à partir des réalités sous-régionales? Ça a été dit par le vice-président ce matin. Pourquoi ne pas voir les chefs religieux de chaque côté? Qu'est-ce qu'ils peuvent apporter? Le Bénin est dans cette logique et invite les pays limitrophes à réfléchir dans le même sens, invite les partenaires à travailler avec lui pour que la fondation qui est posée par le gouvernement actuel puisse produire de bons fruits pour le bien du Bénin, pour le bien de la sous-région ouest-africaine et l'Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Preparation, I think is the key word for what you were discussing there. So thank you for that input, and very helpful to understand especially what Benin is doing in order to prepare to sign the AFCFTA. Now I would like to hand over to His Excellency Mohamed Abdullah, who's the Minister Plenipotentiary and head of the Economic and Commercial Bureau of the Egyptian Embassy in Lagos. We understand that you put forward an e-commerce strategy, and we'd like to understand how this country plan can be leveraged in the context of the AFCFTA. So what role do you see for e-commerce from an Egyptian point of view within the AFCFTA?
First of all, I should thank you all for giving me this a wonderful opportunity to be with all of you. Secondly, I should be very grateful and thankful for the organizer and all the distinguished guests and presence. In this regard, and due to the very short notice I have got this morning when I have been here to attend such a nice gathering, I'll try to summarize and brief in a few points what exactly we can get from the e-commerce in the AFCFTA, inshallah. I'm sorry for being it is in written form, but I'm always ready to receive any comments. As I was mentioning, that Egypt is the first country to benefit from the use of integrated e-commerce diagnostic framework. And Egypt has a consumer market of more than 100 million, as all of you know, for the time being. The e-commerce should be leveraged to exploit the strengths and opportunities of Egypt's ICT sector with the AFCFTA. This will involve investment in and continuing modernization of infrastructure, especially with Egypt's current implementation of the 4G band. The country's strength in IT talent, for example, in software, should be harnessed for greater exports of IT and IT-enabled services. Egypt's technology sector is a key driver of the country's promising entrepreneurship and innovation. The e-commerce offers developing countries like Egypt opportunities for inclusive growth and enhanced market access. Small and medium-sized enterprises, which already the majority of our state member countries representing in the real economy, are the engine of growth. Hence, leveraging e-commerce can bring great benefits between Egypt and AFCFTA. At last and not least, I think as Egypt, one of the first and early countries and states members of AFCFTA signatories, and we are, I believe that we are really going in the process of ratifying and implementing such great agreement very, very soon, inshallah. We'll be working hard closely with member states, inshallah, to get the most good use of the e-commerce, enabling to facilitate the inter-African trade and trade in services and goods and investments and the free capital movement between our membering countries. Meanwhile, as I wanted also to assure our speakers and our colleagues who were talking this morning regarding the point or the fact that the integration, the full integration of our nations is very essential and is a very important target for us for the coming days or months or whatever it will be the period. The ratification and implementation of this agreement, the FTA, should be done in a very short period, enabling to reach the level or to reach the time where we can see the African industries leading in the world and also integrating with the world economies, developed economies mainly, and also where we can find in our hands the product which can have a label of made in Africa and to make us proud of. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that intervention. I'm keen to now hand over the role of questioning to the audience. Because I want this to be an interactive session, and you've got, you know, amazing panelists up here, which I'm sure you're eager to ask lots of questions to. Like I said in the previous plenary session, please do state your name and the organisation that you're from. If it's a comment, keep it very concise. We prefer questions, though. So if we could have a raise of hands for anybody that wants to take a question. Thank you. Nwane.
My name is Wande Wedobaho, and I work for the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I'm very elated, or just let me say, we at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights are very elated to hear about the extensive consultations that has gone on with the process for ratification of the AFCFTA for Nigeria. But also, I'm talking just generally, not just for Nigeria. I'm hoping, our office hopes that these consultations are broken down to the miniature level as much as is possible, which means that we expect simplified processes, we expect active participation of civil society who can aid government in going even further to the grassroots as much as is possible, to explain to them what the AFCFTA stands for, to make sure that they understand how it would help in terms of growth, but also in terms of impact. We're hoping that there are, as the process is going on, thoughts of inclusion of certain stuff like flanking measures that will make sure that those who might be inadvertently impacted negatively by the process, because there's definitely those who will be, that there are flanking measures that will support them, whether in terms of aid for trade or in terms of simplified trade rules or in terms of NTBs. We're hoping that that process will be taken into consultation. We're hoping also that those who we've heard I've heard so much talk about the vulnerable groups, which is good, which are often when we say vulnerable, we say women, and I find that a little bit unsettling. That women are vulnerable. It's just that a large chunk of them are members or are participants in informal trade, and so but also even on that level, they are impacted in a certain way because trade policies are not gender neutral. Trade policies have gender impacts, and it has different impacts for men and as well as for women. So we're hoping that the consideration of that, of those people that are considered vulnerable, is really factored in when states are thinking of ratifying CFTA. CFTA has the opportunity to lift many people out of poverty. China did it. Africa can do it, but it's only if there is a certain level playing field. If Alhaji Dangote can be complaining of fear of dumping, complaining of fear of flooding market with cheap goods in terms of goods places of origin and all that, you can imagine how the people in the lowest food chain will be impacted by this CFTA. Our hope is rooted in the understanding and knowing, some of you do know that this year is the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So our hope as an office is rooted in the fact that the very first article, which gave life to all of the human rights documents we have, including those on economic, social, cultural rights, which is where the CFTA falls, which says that everyone is born equal in rights and dignity, drives this process to help people achieve the goal of living in dignity. So I don't speak the language of taxation, of fiscal policies, of NTBs, of tariffs, but I speak the language of dignity. And that, I know, is the reason why states want to make sure that their people are able to live and thrive in dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a comment, but it was a very strong comment and really rooted in basically the human rights approach to the AFCFTA. Any more questions? Yes. This gentleman at the front in the cream.
Thank you. I am Adebayo Adedokun, Department of Economics, University of Lagos. My question is going to be directed to those who are still yet to sign, Nigeria and Benin Republic. The question is, do we have a timeline? Because when we say we are consultation can go as long as 5 years, can be as much as 10 years, and it can as well be as short as 1 year. So do we have a timeline? Then for those who have signed, what have we done differently to attract or to be an incentive to those who are yet to sign? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's start with those who haven't signed. I think Nigeria said they're going to sign tomorrow. But we won't take that as gospel truth. Exactly. But let's start with Ambassador Sokwe very quickly.
Yes, it is working. A report will be sent to the president in 10 weeks from now, and when that report gets to him, a decision will be made by the president. He is the decision maker. He's at the head of the executive branch of government. So that's the answer on the timeline. When the report gets to the president in 10 and a half weeks, from now, a decision will be made. And in response to the question on human rights and consultations, I led the nationwide consultations. I want to confirm to you, madam, that we went everywhere. We even went to Boko Haram country. We did. I'm not playing around with words. We went to the border towns. We spoke to the transporters, long carriages of them, transporting Nigerian-made goods into North Africa and Central Africa and East Africa. We spoke to AWEP, the association, you know them, of women entrepreneurs, women in business. So we went across the board and we spoke to all groups. And if you go to the website, I would encourage you to go to the website of the Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations. You would see the negotiated communiques by the stakeholders themselves, including female groups, and including those communiques autonomously submitted. I tell you, this was diligent, it was thorough, it was comprehensive, it was nationwide, it was bottom-up, and it was transparent, and believe me, it met the test of consultations.
Thank you. And then I'd like to turn to Chakaru Tijani, Technical Advisor on Trade from Benin, in terms of timeline.
Merci, Madame.
I'm the coordinator in terms of timeline. Benin Republic is anticipating the summit of heads of state of Africa, and that summit actually had a number of decisions that everybody should sign and ratify before the end of the year. By the time the head of state of Benin Republic is actually okay with this, I think we are going to keep to that particular timeline. And why? It is unimaginable that Benin Republic, a member of UEMOA, ECOWAS, will not sign by the time every other country in ECOWAS will have signed. That is to say that ECOWAS will not be operational if Benin doesn't do that. Therefore, the signature of the entire countries of ECOWAS will make it possible for the putting in place of this African Free Trade Agreement within ECOWAS. That is a reality which all of us know, and that we must go ahead to follow. Secondly, we have the Lagos State, which is a privileged partner of most of Benin Republic. If we must actually have a facilitation kind of agreement and put in place some cooperation and development of trade between a country, then it has to be Nigeria. Then I think that Lagos State is one of the states which is very privileged. And our honorable, who has just mentioned here, we have a responsibility, two of us, to make sure that African Free Trade Agreement becomes a reality. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from the audience? Gentleman in the yellow tie. You'd like to? Okay. Can we take an intervention from the Minister of Trade in Mali before we go to the question?
What others who have signed, I think the process is already on course. The reality is that about 40-something countries have signed, and they have done that. There is a process which has actually started in two phases. There is a very first phase which must be concluded between now and March 2019, and that particular phase will take the simpler aspect, that's the institutional framework, and also the liberalization of trade. I think that's a much more simpler aspect. The second phase, which is much more complex. In the very first phase, there's a dialogue and also advocacy. Second phase, which is a little bit more complex because it also has to do with services to my innovation research, that phase should have started from August, but has not started. But I think it's also start too is to tell you that the process is on course, and we've been having several meetings at the ministerial level between now and November. We've already had 2 meetings in Addis Abeba's ministers to actually move on with this first phase. Therefore, I understand I can now understand much more better the kind of situation that most of our countries are actually trying to look into, particularly like Nigeria, because once the whole of ECOWAS, just like the Benin Republic man has said, has actually, we already have about 40-something countries in Africa who've signed. The 7 have already ratified, and there are some countries which are already on process to ratify. We will certainly ratify. We should not forget that we are trying to build an African market that is beyond different regional blocks, beyond the different organizations. And therefore, I think that those who have not signed are also going to do. The process is not going to stop. There are plannings that have been done at the level of trade ministers, and even those who have not signed have been participating in these meetings we've been having. And we are trying to see how we can go beyond that, because the world is not waiting for anyone. Currently, if you see what is happening at the level of WTO, the big economies are trying to negotiate amongst themselves. I was in Brussels last week, a meeting of ACP, EU. We met with EU ministers and also other ACP ministers. They are not waiting for anything. Therefore, we are going to organize ourselves and make sure that we should be in the different negotiations. It's not a situation that will not move with the times, because even since the creation of WTO, we noticed that WTO is actually giving us a special treatment as developing countries. If we are going to continue to benefit from this kind of treatment, we therefore have to organize ourselves as African countries and conform to what is happening at a global level. Thank you.
Very much. We're going to take a few more questions. I did promise the gentleman with the yellow tie, he was just about to ask a question.
Hi, Amin Mati from the International Monetary Fund. Just wanted to follow up on one question on Benin. We heard this morning from the industry and the business representatives that ECOWAS itself still needs some more work, that it's not really working. Yet you're talking here about the AFCFTA. And one example that came was why we weren't able to export through Benin. So just asking that question to you, do you agree with that? And what else that can be done on that side?
Thank you very much. We'll take another question. The gentleman in the hat. Yeah.
My name is Arcanjo Wakonzo. I come from Angola. I'm just an entrepreneur. And the first thing that I want to say is that I'm really thankful as a young African that we're having this change at our time. And this is a thing to congratulate all the ministers of the countries that are actually agreeing with it right now. So my question is basically, how far are we in terms of the currency, the unique currency of Africa? Because the currency is a key player when it comes to commerce, and especially intercontinental exchange of goods. And I heard the Minister of Egypt talking about the e-commerce. Yeah, I also would like to know how far are you with the virtual selling, and if you use the Bitcoin, which is the virtual currency. And because I think we can actually improve this and avoid a lot of issues in the future if we work specifically on the currency and what way we're using to commerce in terms of internationally and different countries. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to start with the e-commerce question. For Egypt, in terms of, one, how far are we with actually the kind of Pan-African approach to a common currency, but then also how far is Egypt in terms of using more digital currencies and bitcoins within their own systems?
Can you repeat, please?
Sorry, say that again?
Would you repeat, please?
Yeah. So the first question was, how far are we with a common currency? across the continent. And then the second question was how does or if Egypt is using digital currencies at the moment like Bitcoin?
I think as my colleague was just mentioning that it should be go through stages, phases. Now, the first phase that we are discussing the ratification and the implementation of the AFCFTA. The second phase, when the ministers sit together and after ratification and start implementing such agreement, I think they will give it to the specialized bodies at each country, state, who are in charge for the monetary system to sit together and to discuss how it will go in the very near future, whether we will be having a common currency for all member states or a certain currency for each country to introduce it to the other states, whether on bilateral level or multilateral level. So it will be within the two phases or the two stages which will be following for the next period. I think before, I mean, and the way to, or in the process to ratify and implement the AFCFTA.
Thank you. And in terms of using digital currencies in the Egyptian economy, where is that? Things like Bitcoin, that type of adoption.
I think also that it's now under studying, and they have taken some also procedures in moving in such direction. And as we all hear, I think, in the newspaper, that for this coin they are going to issue some coins replacing the notes and also the paper notes on other coins, although very, very shortly. But exactly, they didn't mention the date exactly, maybe by the end of the year or the early 2019. We will see how it will go, but I think it will be within the next few months, inshallah, this kind of digital currency will be in the market, inshallah, on the local level.
Okay, and actually I wanted to